then came just unbelievable rains, just downpour, sheets of rain. Pakistan this year received something like almost 200% of its average monsoonal rainfall in the period of 3 months.
There's absolute devastation in Pakistan, where 1/3 of the country remains underwater a week after the country was ravaged by the deadliest floods the country has ever seen. Now, nearly 1,400 people have already died, 13,000 people have reportedly been injured, and millions have been left homeless since an unprecedented monsoon started in mid-June. Now, there were also destructive floods in the country back in 2010, but this time around, the situation is even worse and has been fueled by the climate emergency. In fact, 2 million acres of farmland has been completely destroyed, and tens of millions of Pakistanis need humanitarian relief right away. There's also some other evidence of the climate emergency in Pakistan, as is usually the case when it comes to some of the poorer countries around the world. For instance, there are glaciers in Pakistan that have begun to melt, creating these lakes. And the infrastructure in Pakistan can't withstand those bodies of water. And so that is also fueling some of the floods that we're seeing in Pakistan. In this video, you'll get a better understanding of just how the climate emergency has contributed to this extreme weather event. Let's watch.
Experts say the disaster bears the hallmarks of a changing climate.
A warmer climate means that you have more intense rainfall, and also a warmer climate means that glaciers are more likely to melt and collapse quicker. Both of those things came together in this tragic event in Pakistan.
The South Asian monsoon pattern descends on Pakistan each year between June and September. Normally, it brings much needed rains after summer. But research shows the annual monsoons are getting wetter and more dangerous because of climate change. Between June and August this year, Pakistan received nearly 3 times the 30-year average rainfall for this time of year, and meteorologists are warning there is more rain on the way.
So, Cenk, it's just been absolutely devastating, and the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, makes a great point in that it's really incumbent upon the wealthier nations to provide relief to countries like Pakistan, which of course has been ravaged by the consequences of climate change. And it's the rich countries that have contributed to climate change, not the poor countries that absolutely need our help. We'll go to his statement in just a minute, but I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in.
Yeah. So, here in America, we have to remind people of things like, hey, climate change is real. 99% of the world's scientists aren't lying, because as we were talking earlier in the show about, the Russian government does propaganda through its media and has convinced the Russian citizens that they are fighting Nazis in America and Ukraine, when those are just fictions, total fictions. And here in America, our media has convinced us that, hey, Republicans could be right, Democrats could be right. Can't quite tell. It seems like probably 99% of the world's scientists aren't lying, but we're not sure. Okay. So the rest of the world is perfectly aware of it and unfortunately living under this problem. So Pakistan has 220 million people. 32 million were displaced by the flood. Imagine if in America, 32 million people were displaced. Where the hell would we put them? I mean, let alone the thousands who are dead. But here in America, we have another problem. If it doesn't happen here, we don't care. We don't give a damn at all, right? So now what Pakistan is saying is what a lot of countries are saying. But wait a minute, we didn't create climate change. We didn't benefit from climate change. We know who did. The largest countries in the world and their corporations. Exxon, Chevron, BP, you name it. By the way, also Russian oil companies and Chinese coal companies. They got all of the profits. But now Pakistan, that is certainly way, way poorer than those countries, has to pay for an unbelievable record-breaking cleanup and have all of these dead civilians. And they're like, well, why are we paying for it? You guys made the profit. Why don't you pay for it? And honestly, that makes a ton of sense.
It does. And I appreciate that the head of the UN is making that case. So with that said, why don't we take a look at the next video?
Large swathes of farmland in Pakistan have been destroyed. Millions have been displaced. Pakistan says it alone cannot deal with this disaster, which is being blamed on climate change. And with the UN chief Antonio Guterres visiting Pakistan, many are hopeful that more help will arrive.
Pakistan needs massive financial support to respond to this crisis that have costed, according to some estimate, about $30 billion and counting. And that support is entirely necessary, and it is not a matter of solidarity, it's a matter of justice.
Yeah, so that's the right word to use. It's a matter of justice and trying to provide the funding to, not make up for the damage caused to the environment by the wealthier countries. It certainly wouldn't make up for it, but this humanitarian aid is so desperately needed. I should also note that this is all taking place in Pakistan with the backdrop of political instability and an economic crisis. So Pakistan is experiencing economic freefall. It is very likely that the country will default on its loans. So there's some concern about that. And as I mentioned, Cenk, we're talking about 2 million acres of agricultural lands that have been destroyed as a result of this flooding, people who have been displaced because their homes have been destroyed. It really is incumbent on some of these wealthier nations to provide relief to Pakistan. And the political instability, I should note, has been going on for some time, especially considering the fact that their leader had to step down recently and is being charged by charged through their anti-terrorism laws. We can get into that a little bit, but it's just a complete and utter disaster in Pakistan as we speak.
Yeah. So look, guys, let's clarify a couple of important things. Who's we that we speak of? So because if you're sitting in Nebraska, you might be thinking, wait a minute, I didn't profit from any oil companies. Why am I paying Pakistan's bill? Okay. And by the way, the right wing here in America will take advantage of that and stoke that fire, right? Okay, great. I have a perfect solution. Then why doesn't the companies that created climate change pay for it? Why am I paying for it? I'm with you, brother, in Nebraska. I didn't do it. I didn't make any money off of it, right? So I don't know why the governments have to pay. Why doesn't Exxon pay?
It's a good point.
No, it's a real question. That's an externality of their business, Anna, right? So if they have, every business has costs and revenue. They're keeping all the revenue, but they're unloading all their costs on us, American people, Pakistani people. Why are we letting them? It's insane.
Yeah, no, you make such a great point because honestly, Cenk, it's so incredible because I'm so used to we, the taxpayers, paying for the failures of US-based corporations and multinational corporations. That it didn't even occur to me that that was a possibility. That's the kind of conditioning we get not only from our politicians, but from the corporate media, right? The idea of the very companies and corporations that have contributed the most to the climate emergency paying for the damage that they've caused is inconceivable. And that is the greatest injustice. And we keep seeing it happening over and over again. It's always the poorest countries that suffer the biggest consequences of the damage done by these profit-seeking corporations. And we need to push for justice. I don't think that ordinary people should have to pay for the damage that's been caused by these companies.
Look, I'll say my usual point here at the end. Why have you never heard of the idea of the corporations that profited from climate change paying for just simply the costs of climate change? It's their product that cost all of us this money. Why do we have to pay it instead of them, right? The reason you've never heard that idea is because most of the media in America are also corporations. So these corporations are all protecting each other, and they're never going to tell you the super obvious points because most of those folks are their advertisers and funnel a part of the proceeds back to the media for propaganda instead of news.